Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Sarah Slim, and it's time for News Bulletin on Channel 2. President Fattah al-Sisi received on Sunday EU Commissioner for the Mediterranean, Dubravka Šuica. The meeting was attended by Foreign Minister Badr Abdulati. The presidential spokesman, Ambassador Mohammed al-Shinnawi, said that during the meeting, Sisi hailed the EU's decision to create the title of the Commissioner for Mediterranean Affairs, being a step toward boosting cooperation between the two sides. He said Sisi expressed appreciation to ties with the EU, especially after it was elevated to the level of comprehensive strategic ties in March 2024. He said the meeting discussed the cooperation in the immigration file, the need to follow a comprehensive mechanism that links immigration to development. He also called for boosting ties in the field of legal immigration and treating routes caused for illegal immigration. The presidential spokesman said that for her part, the EU's Commissioner for Mediterranean Affairs was keen on listening to President Sisi's vision with regards to developments in Gaza. He said this included the Egyptian efforts to implement the ceasefire agreement, exchange of detainees, entry of humanitarian assistance, and starting reconstruction of the enclave without the relocation of its people. She said the EU is in support of efforts to stabilize the region and establish of a Palestinian state, which is the only guarantee to achieving permanent peace in the region. Developments in Libya, Sudan, and Syria also topped the agenda of the talks, as both sides agreed over the need to exert all efforts to achieve stability in these countries. Foreign Minister Badr Abdulati held a joint press conference with EU Commissioner for the Mediterranean, Dubravka Šuica, following their talks in Cairo on Sunday. Speaking at the joint press conference, Abdulati said that the visit by the EU's Commissioner for the Mediterranean reflects both sides' willingness to strengthen relations. He said the talks touched on security and cultural cooperation and illegal immigration. He said discussions also discussed the economic cooperation and attracting more European partners to the Egyptian market. The meeting comes within the framework of high-level deliberations by the EU's Commissioner to issue a new Mediterranean charter. The EU Embassy in Egypt said the charter, being drafted by Mediterranean countries and EU member states, aims to deal with the common challenges, boosting ties among the peoples of the two blocs and expand economic growth. He said achieving regional stability and security is also an objective of the new charter. He said the visit by the Commissioner of the Mediterranean underlines the strength of ties between the EU and Cairo and is a chance to evaluate the implementation of the comprehensive strategic partnership signed in March 2024. The Israeli occupation stopped the entry of all goods and supplies into the Gaza Strip today and warned of additional consequences if Hamas doesn't accept a new proposal to extend a ceasefire. Hamas accused the Israeli occupation of trying to derail the existing ceasefire agreement and described its decision as being a cheap extortion, a war crime, and a blatant attack on the truce, which its first phase expired yesterday. The two sides have yet to negotiate the second phase, in which Hamas was to release dozens of remaining hostages in return for an Israeli occupation pullout and a lasting ceasefire. The office of the Prime Minister of the Israeli Occupation Authority, Benjamin Netanyahu, said earlier that it had adopted a proposal by U.S. President Donald Trump envoy Steve Witkoff for a temporary ceasefire in Gaza for Ramadan and Passover periods, hours after the first phase of the previously agreed ceasefire expired. If agreed, the truce would hold fighting until around April 20. The Occupation Authority, however, said that the truce would be conditional on Hamas releasing half of the living and dead hostages of the first day, with the remainder released at the conclusion if an agreement is reached on a permanent ceasefire. Hamas says it is committed to the originally agreed ceasefire that had been scheduled to move into a second phase and has rejected the idea of a temporary extension to the truce. Humanitarian and relief aid trucks lined at the Rafah border crossing awaiting entrance to the Gaza Strip. The Egyptian border outlet also kept receiving the wounded and patients arriving from the war-torn strip for admission at Egyptian hospitals for treatment. Operations at the border outlet resumed to allow the delivery of the largest amount possible of urgently needed aid to Gaza residents per ceasefire agreement, which finally brought fighting into a halt. However, much of these aid trucks were suspended by the Israeli occupation side since yesterday in violation of the ceasefire deal. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said he had signed a declaration to expedite delivery of approximately $4 billion in military assistance to Israel. The Trump administration, which took office on January 20, has approved nearly $12 billion in major foreign military sales to Israel. Rubio said in a statement, adding that it will continue to use all available tools to fulfill America's long-standing commitment to Israel's security, including means to counter security threats. Rubio said he had used the emergency authority to expedite the delivery of military assistance to Israel to its Middle East ally, now in a ceasefire with Hamas in their war in Gaza. The United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has said that he will join an emergency meeting of the Arab League in Cairo next week to discuss the reconstruction of Gaza. Guterres said he would outline priorities at the meeting, including that the ceasefire and hostage deal in Gaza must hold and that there must be a clear political framework towards the enclave's recovery and lasting stability, adding that he will also seek an urgent de-escalation of the situation in the Israeli-occupied West Bank. Guterres noted that Gaza and the West Bank must be treated as one and governed by a Palestinian government with no reductions in its territory or forced transfer of its population. Egypt expressed its rejection of any attempts to threaten the unity, sovereignty and territorial integrity of Sudan, including exerted efforts to form a parallel Sudanese government, which complicate the scene in Sudan and hinder the ongoing efforts to unite the vision between the Sudanese political power. In a statement by the Foreign Ministry, Egypt called on all Sudanese political powers to prioritize the country's higher national interests and engage positively in launching a comprehensive political process without any foreign interference. Britain is hosting a summit of European leaders to shore up support for Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky after an astonishing Oval Office blowout with the U.S. President Donald Trump that left many uncertain where the once staunch allies stood. The London meeting has now taken on greater importance in defending the war-torn ally and boosting the continent's defenses. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, who is hosting the summit, announced that Britain, France and Ukraine have agreed to work on a ceasefire plan to present to the United States, a plan that emerged following the White House pact. That's all for now. Stay tuned for the coming updates on the top of the hour. I'm Sarah Slim. Thank you for watching.